Sandwich, bathroom, laconic, sadistic. Why you'd better avoid these words when writing your fantasy book. The other day I was reading an article about applying etymology for fantasy writing. The link will be below. And I got really excited about the topic. I love etymology and it always excites me to apply some linguistics for my world building. In this very article, the author was talking about what words it's better to avoid if you write fantasy, because the origin of those words are deeply rooted to real world names, people, and things. I went into this rabbit hole and discovered some more interesting words, and I bet you had no idea how these words appeared. So let's talk about them and their history and why you should not, or maybe should, after all, use these words for your fantasy. But before we start, greetings, stranger. My name is Katie. I'm a fantasy writer and a narrative game designer. So here we talk about fantasy world building and linguistics. What is eponym? Eponym is the name for this type of words, the name of an object or activity that is also the name of the person who first produced the object or did the activity. Let me give you some examples. Cardigan, a jacket-like woolen sweater that opens at the front and may have buttons that are often left undone. The origin is quite interesting. The 7th Earl of Cardigan, James Thomas Broadnell, was an officer in the British Army. He and his men often wore knitted waistcoats that opened at the front. After he led the successful charge of the Light Brigade in 1854 against Russian forces in the Crimea, the waistcoats or cardigans became highly fashionable in England. Guillotine, a machine for beheading, it was named in recognition of French physician Joseph Guillotin, who, as a deputy to the National Assembly, proposed for humanitarian and efficiency reason, the capital punishment be carried out by beheading quickly and cleanly on a machine, which was built in 1791 and first used the next year. Decibel. Decibel was coined by telephone engineers to describe the efficiency of the telephone circuits. It is a substitute for the phrase transmission unit. The actual unit decided upon was first called bell, after Scottish-born telephone pioneer Alexander Graham Bell, and the bell, however, is larger than is needed in practice, and therefore a unit 1/10 as large was adopted by engineers and named the decibel. Mesmerize, basically hypnotize. The origin of mesmerism, named for Franz Anton Mesmer, Austrian physician who developed a theory of animal magnetism and a mysterious body fluid which allows one person to hypnotize another, and propounded it in 1778 in Paris. Boycott. The withdrawal of support or the refusal to buy or use something. The origin of it is quite interesting as well. Charles Boycott was a land agent who refused to reduce the cost of rent in Ireland in the late 18th century. Farmers who were his tenants held a campaign against Boycott. They refused to provide labor for him or sell to him. He eventually had to move away. Shrapnel. The origin is the Henry Shrapnel was a British artillery officer who invented the shrapnel shell, a shell filled with metal projectiles that were intended to kill troops. It was adopted by the British Army and used in cannons and rifles. Another word is guy. Guy, well, we know, an informal word for unnamed male person, or well, sometimes it's also female or group of people. The origin leads us to Guy Fawkes, who was a British Catholic who, with a group of others, attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament and assassinate King James of England and Scotland in 1605. The failed attempt is known as the Gunpowder Plot. At the time, Guy was not a popular name. In fact, Guy Fawkes preferred the name Guido. Guy Fawkes became well known because of his role in the Gunpowder Plot. He was tortured and killed and remembered for his attempt. Over time, the British began to use the word guy to mean effigy, like a model of a person or badly dressed man. Eventually, this word made its way to America, where it lost its negative associations and came to mean fellow or man or body. Chauvinism, exaggerated blind nationalism, came from the character Nicholas Chauvin, the soldier of Napoleon's Grand Army, who idealized Napoleon and the empire long after it was history. In Cognier's popular 1831 vaudeville, The Coquard Tricolore, the meaning was extended to excessive belief in the superiority of one's race. Sandwich, and that's my favorite one. Well, we know sandwich like two slices of bread with something between them. And it is said to be a reference to John Montagu, the fourth Earl of Sandwich, who was said to be a gambler, who ate thin slices of cold meat between bread at the gambling table during marathon sessions rather than rising for a proper meal. This account of the origin dates to 1770, and by 1762, these sandwiches were being served in upscale dining clubs. The open-faced sandwich, by the way, served on a single slice of bread, is recorded by 1920s. Silhouette. The outline of a dog shape on a light background, often the profile of a human face. Etienne de Silhouette was a French minister of finance who imposed heavy taxes. People could not afford to get their portraits painted, so instead they got profile paper cutouts made. At the time, anything that was made cheaply was associated with the name Silhouette. Draconian refers to laws, rules, or punishments that are excessively harsh, severe, or cruel. The origin is not connected to dragons. Drago is the Latinized form of the Greek drakon, named after Archon of Athens, who laid down a code of laws of Athens that mandated death as punishment for minor crimes. Okay, so these are some example of some interesting words, nice history and stuff, but how it actually can be connected or used for fantasy writing, you may ask. Language is the reflection of our world, our views, and our lives. How can you use it for your fantasy world building? As I'm always saying, names carry power. Just think about it a couple of times and ask yourself, how can it be applicable for your fantasy world? I mean, you may have a recognizable figure or event known to the great majority of people in your universe. Maybe they use his name as a reference to some senseless war or unpunished cruelty. Or maybe there was a governor who liked to wear his hair high and it influenced their whole nobility, and their hairstyle was named after him. It doesn't mean that eponyms are necessary for your book or should be used in a great amount, but it can be like a cherry on the top of your cake. And that's it for today. Hope you liked it and that this video was useful. Don't forget to write down in the comments what words origin you found most interesting. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.